Fisher of Men by But I Don't Want to Be a Pirate. I used to bartend at this hole-in-the-wall dive bar down in South Boston back in the mid-2000s. The kind of rusty, run-down little shithole with rust-weeping nails that you'll only find in spitting distance from any of the wharfs and harbors of the world. On a slow day once a week, and twice on pay weeks, give or take, a drunkard by the name of Brandon would stop in, lay 320s on the counter, and yammer these fucking stories at me, until his money ran out or his ass fell off the stool, or both. Most of his stories were the typical meandering ramblings of a barfly. This bitch thought she was too good, and that IRS is always trying to fuck me. Stuff like that. But he always put back enough cheap whiskey for a Scotch horse, and tipped well. And per drink. So, until and unless he became completely incoherent, he had my ear most nights. One night, though, the jaundiced little fucker told a story that I had to give him some credit for. One that chilled me. Got to me a little bit. And it's the only one I remember these days. It was a Wednesday, something like that. Probably 4 in the afternoon, and Brandon had to have been on his 4th daily pour, convalescing his cashews in his fingers. He always asked me for a bowl of these salted fucking cashews we had. And he turns to me, ready to yammer the hours away.
"Hey, Chuck,"
he started, calling at me too loudly for the distance we were apart.
"I got a good one for you, if you like a good story."
And so I nodded politely, as I always did, walked over to hear his slurred nonsense for the day. And here's what Brandon the barfly told me, to the best of my recollection.
"You know, I used to be a medic in the Coast Guard back when I still lived in Miami," he began. "Not for too long, on account of when I hurt my bum shoulder playing backyard tackle in summer '86. I told you about that, right, Chuck? Yeah, I musta. Anyways, back in '84, they had me doing chopper rescues out at sea. Some poor fuckers would always get their fishing boats out in storms, or nasty ship fires or the like, and they'd fly us out to put people in those little baskets and haul them up to the chopper to rescue them. Hero shit, you know? We'd be out in the wind and the rain and shit, getting tossed and everything. But we were friggin' badasses back then, you know? Anyways, this one day, we were out on a search and rescue looking for this big fancy yacht. Some bigwig hedge fund zillionaire and his family had gone and gotten lost, and hadn't shown up in Bimini when they were supposed to, and couldn't get him on the radio. They'd been missing for about 3 days, and we were told the yacht was pretty massive, like one with a crew and butlers and shit. So we were looking out for a big old son of a bitch, maybe banged up on a sandbar. But instead, we see this life raft. The big orange polygon type you saw in that Tom Hanks movie with the volleyball. And we can see that there's a guy in it, as well as a dog. Chocolate lab it looked like. When we got the chopper down low, we could see him up close. So we send in one of our guys, Richie, down there in the basket. And he pulls the guy up and we load him onto our stretcher. Kid was probably 25, sunbaked to shit, and damn near passed out. But just as Richie goes back to go down for the dog, the kid sits up in the gurney like goddamn Frankenstein and grabs Richie's arm. Damn near popped his shoulder out, Richie told me. And then starts begging us to leave the dog. Just pleading with me and Rich, in this rambling sort of way. "It'll kill you," he told us, and we figured maybe it'd become rabid out on the trip or something. I don't really know. But the guy was sunbaked like a fucking tomato, and the chopper was running low on gas, so we left that dog in the raft. Decided to gas back up and come back later for it. And let me tell you, Chuck, after listening to what this guy told me when we got him back to the ship, I'm glad we did it that way. Listen to this. So the guy passed out on the flight back, and back in the med bay on the Coast Guard cutter, he sits back up like he'd done earlier. Scared me half to shit again and starts asking about that fucking dog. So I tell him we left it out on the life raft and we're planning to head back out to find it. And he says to me, "Do not bring that fucking thing back here." So I ask him if he'd been on board this yacht we'd been looking for, the Sunfarer. I think that's the name of the ship. And he says, yeah, he was a deckhand. So I asked him where the ship was. The $1,000,000 question, after all. And he just gives me this blank stare. Says he needs time to think, and I was beginning to think he got caught fucking the yacht owner's wife or something. and then killed them or some shit. But I decided to play it cool. So I shrugged and told him it'd be about 4 hours sail back to Miami and that he ought to get his story straight before then, seeing that the authorities would likely question the hell out of him on shore. And I told him that he had an easy ear with me if he cared to try and explain. And I think he really wanted to tell somebody. So he lays it on to me over the next 4 hours. And let me tell you, Chuck, what he said had my fucking neck hairs on end.
By this point, a few of the other bargoers had gathered around me and Barnum. The little fucker was spinning what was turning out to be an intriguing little story, and he didn't even notice he was beginning to draw a crowd. I could tell it was only going to get more interesting from there because his cashew fingers were a-twirling, and he continued the story, wide-eyed.
So the deckhand tells me they'd been about a week out of Rome, headed out for Bimini, and they'd come up on a lifeboat. There's some ship's name that the kid couldn't remember painted on the side, but he said it had an Indian sound to it, and lo and behold, there was nobody inside except this dog, the chocolate lab. So the hedge fund family is thrilled with this dog, like the grandkids are just in love with the thing, playing fetch with it and this and that, and they don't really question it, you know? People love dogs, I guess. But the whole situation just struck the deckhand as kind of weird, he told me. And he didn't like that dog one bit. He said that the dog had a collar, and then the caller said the dog's name was Tugboat. Now here's where it really gets weird. You ready, Chuck? The yacht's crew quarters were on the very lowest level. Guess the rich pricks saved the money views for themselves. And the night after they found this dog, the deckhand begins to hear a fucking knocking coming from beyond the hull. Like something out in the sea. He said it kind of sounded like when the yacht was in port and would bob up against the dock, but heavier, almost like somebody was lightly tapping the outside of the hull with a baseball bat. So the kid tries to go about his work over the next few days, but he keeps hearing the same weird shit coming from outside the hull at night. He tells me it got worse each night, up until one night when everyone on the ship is launched out of their fucking beds at like 3 in the morning. They all head out onto the sun deck to see just what the hell was going on, and the captain comes around, tells everyone that the ship's propellers threw a blade, and the resultant vibration messed up the power generator. Tells everyone not to worry and that they've activated the distress beacon and would wait for assistance.
Barnum had barely touched his drink. I couldn't believe my goddamn eyes when I saw his nearly full glass, and the whole bar had gone fucking silent as he leaned into the story.
Chuck, the Coast Guard never actually picked up that distress beacon, which makes the next part fucking creepier. So the kid tells me he goes back to his quarters to pass the time, and he hears the knocking sound again. He said it sounded like something was trying to gnaw the other prop off. Well, that's what he thought anyway. But he said the whole ship would rock with each knock. He told me that's when he became really panicked. Kind of like fight or flight caveman shit. And he booked it over to where they keep the emergency life rafts and duffel bags. As he's walking with one back to his room along the outer deck, the ship lurches to one side and gets thrown into the water. The life raft automatically inflated when it hit the seawater. That's how life rafts work. And the kid pulls himself inside it, still dazed and coughing. And as he turns to the ship, he watches as the whole fucking yacht was pulled underwater in less than a second, flat. The huge whirlpool the ship made when it went down in the drink sucked the life raft in, and the kid said he blacked out at that point. So this kid wakes up the next morning in the raft, and there's that fucking dog sitting in the raft with him. The only other survivor, bone dry and tail a-wagging. So then, Chuck, this kid pauses his story and he looks right fucking at me and asks, in a trembling voice, if I've ever heard of an anglerfish. They're these goblin little fuckers that live only in the darkest, deepest oceans. See, they hunt in a curious manner. They have a long sort of antennae-like thing coming out of their heads, and it has this kind of little glowing ball on the end, and they sit perfectly still in the darkness of the deep ocean with this little glowing ball stuck way far out in front of them. And they wait. Some unsuspecting little fish comes along and sees the pretty glowing orb come out of total darkness and goes to check it out. And then wham! motherfucker becomes a codfish kebab and the anglerfish gets another meal. Which leads me to the final rub of this story, Chuck. See, unbeknownst to me at the time, Richie and the rest of the chopper crew had left without me, back out to find the fucking dog tugboat. The chopper ended up disappearing in a storm. Or so we all heard a few days later. Never did see those boys again.
On that Wednesday afternoon, midway through only his fourth drink, Bonham the barfly stood up from his stool, nodded sadly and soberly to himself, and walked out of the bar without another word.